It's the McShay Show presented by FanDuel. It's time for the first 12-team playoff, and you can bet on all of the action with FanDuel. Just think about all the opportunities we're going to have to bet on the college football playoff. We're talking about different conferences, home games for certain teams, the 3 or 4 week run that you're going to have to play. There's so much to earn if you're betting with FanDuel this college football playoff season. Why we love FanDuel? There's so many markets like spreads, over-unders, national championship futures, and so much more. This app is safe, secure, and easy to use. When you win, you'll get paid instantly. Visit FanDuel.com/McShay to download America's #1 sportsbook. The Ringer is committed to responsible gambling. Visit rg-help.com to learn more about the resources and helplines available. And listen to the end of the episode for additional details. Must be 21 and older and present in select states. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit rg-help.com. Well, the Patriots spit away the #1 overall pick.
Yeah, they find ways to lose even when they win, man.
Listen, there are more questions than answers also at the quarterback position in this year's class. Plus, Penn State, Notre Dame, Texas, Ohio State. It's the college football playoff semifinals, and the NFL playoffs are here too. Not to mention, the top of the order is finally set with just 107 days until the NFL draft. Mensch, you good?
I'm good, man.
All right, here we go. Cheer me up, Todd. Aware of what goes on inside a football building, right, Mensch?
Yeah.
It's a bubble. You're purposely isolated. You want the only messaging that you get as a football player to be from the coaching staff. The blinders are on, right? And so what happened with the New England Patriots and winning this final game and losing the #1 overall draft pick, it's not shocking in that every player that's on that field is playing to win. They're playing to win for themselves, for their families, for their teammates. They're playing to put good tape out there in the universe, if you will, for their own coaching staff, the next coaching staff. If they're free agents, the possibility and opportunity to go play somewhere else. So it's like, no one is ever going to tell a football player to go out and give 75%, find a way to lose. It's just not how it works. And the coaching staff's the same. Like, you're not going to tell Jerod Mayo, you're not going to tell Alex Van Pelt, the offensive coordinator, hey, come up with a scheme that's just not going to quite work, right?
No.
You're just not going to do it. That's why this is a top-down situation. It was a top-down situation for the New England Patriots going into Week 18, Game 17, knowing that we currently possess in our hands the #1 overall pick. It's up to us to maintain that #1 overall pick. We have 2 assets in this organization. The first is Drake May, and it's the hardest asset to find for an NFL team, finding your quarterback and getting him young. It's one thing to have a guy on a second contract where you're paying him, and it's killing your salary cap. It's another to have it a rookie, and he's taking up a fraction of your salary cap because the rookie contracts and the collective bargaining agreement that occurred several years ago that put a cap on that. And so it's one thing to kind of tank a season. You think back to Major League, and we've seen it in previous years. Like, all right, let's not chew up a lot of our salary cap, which the Patriots didn't. They have the largest salary cap in the NFL. And we'll get to that in a little bit. It's another thing, Steve, to have to lose one game. That becomes trickier. But the Kansas City Chiefs did a beautiful fucking job of doing it. Yeah. I mean, did you see that list of players that did not play for the Chiefs? Right. In addition, did you watch that game against the Broncos? And I'm not saying they were purposely trying to tank, but they were purposely protecting their organization in not starting all of those players, making sure they got the rest, throwing out cover 2 and cover 3 all day long, not blitzing, very vanilla offensive game plan. Denver just rolled through them.
Yeah, they understood the assignment. They got what they needed to do.
The organization, though, understood the assignment. It's not the 52, 53 players that were dressed playing in that game. It's not their assignment. I want to be perfectly clear. Yes, Drake May did not start. As I mentioned last week, he should not start the final game. The Patriots need this first pick, okay? But the organization didn't do enough. And by that, I mean from the top down, Robert Kraft, the owner, the Kraft family, everyone involved at the top did not do enough to make sure they secured that number 1 overall pick. And you say, well, how could they have done it? Well, yeah, not starting Drake May was part of it. And obviously Joe Milton goes out and has a phenomenal game, and that adds some value. I mean, no one expected him to have one of the highest QBRs in the entire NFL season this year. Like but if you know, and you can't tell me during the second or third quarter of one of the better performances the Patriots had all season long, that Robert Kraft is up there typing out to his assistant, hey, let's dictate a press release. I don't like what's going on in the field. That's not what happened. The press release was written. The decision was made. Jerod Mayo was not going to be the head coach of the New England Patriots after this season. And Alex Van Pelt, the offensive coordinator, was not going to be the offensive coordinator moving forward. So why are they coaching in this game?
Right. That's the biggest question I have. I mean, why not let them go? Because again, they are even more motivated now to stick it to, maybe that's not the way of saying it, but have a great performance. They're looking for their next job. That motivation is that much higher. Why not get rid of them? I really don't understand if you're already going to make that move. And don't tell me, I have a really hard time buying the fact that Jerod Mayo didn't have some kind of sense that might be it. Don't tell me that he was coaching thinking that he was going to be there with the Patriots long term. He just living in this area. I'm in Southern New Hampshire. I'm in Patriots country. You knew from the local coverage that he was in trouble. All of the smoke. There was a lot of smoke about him not being back next year. So he had an idea that this could be it. So he's not thinking about what's best for this team long term. I look at it. You have to make that move. You have to let him go before this game, and just so this doesn't happen. This cannot.
And whoever you're putting in position, you're not saying please go out and lose the game. You're elevating someone on the staff who has an understanding that let's go out, let's play hard, let's put a product on the field that we're proud of in terms of effort. Let's give the opportunity to a bunch of young guys, maybe that haven't played in these roles as starters or
see what we got.
Sub package, and let's see what we got. This can be a very helpful game in terms of evaluating tape on who we want to keep moving forward. But let's go out there and do what the Chiefs did offensively and defensively from a scheme standpoint, so that we're seeing what we got on the field. We're giving great effort, but we're not going to go and put our most creative offensive or defensive performance on the field. I go back to this, and I want to preface it with this was a rare, once in a lifetime opportunity. It was, at the time, Bryce Young appeared to be and for a while this season, Bryce Young did not appear like he's the guy. It looked like an epic disaster for the Carolina Panthers. But, as the season progressed and he came back in as the starter, it looks like he could be their guy. But at the time, that's all that matters. At the time, Bryce Young appeared to be a really promising quarterback prospect that the Carolina Panthers thought that they could build their organization around. Okay. But it's not like it was last year's class with Caleb Williams, right? And Jaden Daniels and Drake May and even JJ McCarthy and Bo Nix and Michael Penix. But you don't have to go far back to get the most recent example of a team having the first overall pick in the Chicago Bears and what the trade value turned out to be. It was an epic haul. And I'm not saying the Patriots sitting at 1 with Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward would get the identical haul. But it was a hell of a haul. And the Patriots may have, and we'll get into the quarterbacks in a minute, may have gotten a really good haul. Not same level, but a really good haul to get out of that number 1 pick. If there was a team like the Titans or the Browns or the Giants or the Raiders or the Jets or the Saints that tried to move up. And I just want to go back. And again, I'm not saying they would have gotten this, but they would have gotten a lot in all likelihood. You go back to 2023, just a couple drafts ago. The Bears move out of that number 1 spot, and they move back from 1 to 9. So they get the 9th overall pick in that 2023 draft. They get a second-round selection in that draft. So now they've got two second-round picks. It was the 61st overall pick, which originally was the 49ers. So now you're picking at 9 and 61. They got a first-round pick in the next draft, which is 2024, and a second-round pick in this upcoming draft. And, yeah, it hasn't turned out to be as great as we thought at the time, but they also got DJ Moore, potentially a number 1 wide receiver. That's a lot, man. And the Patriots wouldn't have gotten that probably, but they would have gotten, they would have swapped first rounders. They probably would have gotten like a second this year and maybe a first next year. Even if it was moving down like a couple spots.
Yeah, it's simple math. You're going to get more for 1 than you are going to get for 4. Like, even if it's not that haul, I mean, you just, by moving that far back, you really limit what you can get in a trade. I mean, it's just that simple.
And listen, I'm sure there are a bunch of people listening and watching who are like, get over it. Who cares? You guys live in New England. I haven't rooted for the Patriots since I was like 17 years old. Okay, maybe 20. It's not about this. If this could have been the Cardinals, the Jets, the Giants, the Eagles, it could have been any team. And we'd be having this conversation because it's awkward. And I started this whole conversation out with, we've been in the building, not in the NFL, but in college and high school. Like, how it works. No one is ever talking about, we got to find a way to lose this game. It's not how it works. But there are ways, if as an organization leader in business, sports, whatever, if that you're not moving on with the leadership that you have hired, then why put them out there in the most important situation for building this organization moving forward?
Also, sit anyone who has so much as a hangnail. Sit them all. I know they sat Hunter Henry and Christian Gonzalez, 2 of their better players.
Well, Christian Gonzalez was coming off of he was in concussion protocol. But yes.
Okay. So at least, there was those, but anyone who has so much as a hangnail that is of importance to you, you sit them because you do it under the guise of, look, we need to protect these guys long-term. God forbid one of these guys goes out and gets an ACL or tears an Achilles or, something like that. We need to protect our assets going into next year. I mean, there were so many guys that I would have sat so many more players and they just didn't, they chose not to do it.
So, I mean, we can sit here and we can bash it. Listen, Robert Kraft has done a lot of phenomenal things. And like, we grew up with the Patriots before Robert Kraft was in control of all this.
Oh, yeah.
and like, mess. So like the utmost respect. The Krafts brought me in. I for several years did the NFL draft. For their season ticket holders. I would go down to New England in April and do a draft preview for their season ticket holders. I met Robert Kraft. It's a funny story. The first time I met Robert Kraft, I was there getting ready, all in my suit, getting ready to do a draft show and a draft event for the pre-draft event for the Patriots. And I'm sitting there, I'm cutting it up with Bruschi, right? Teddy Bruschi and I were talking. We'd become good friends over the years of working at ESPN together. And Robert Kraft comes up and Teddy and I are in the middle of a conversation, and Teddy sees Robert and they give each other a big hug. Hadn't seen each other in a little while. And Teddy politely introduces me. I'm not sure if you guys have met, Mr. Kraft. This is Todd McShay. He goes, "Oh no, I'm well aware of who this is." And I was like, "Uh-oh, I'm in trouble." Because oh, I'm well aware who this is. And we just kind of paused, and he looked at me. He looked at Teddy. He wasn't even really looking at me, he wanted to say, it was messaging. He purposely was not looking at me. He's looking at Teddy and he says, "This is the guy who's going to come in and tell us all the things we've done wrong in the draft and all the things we should do in this draft to get our fan base all upset." And I was like, "Oh boy."
Oh boy. And
Teddy jumped in to his credit and it was like, no. He's one of us. Like, puts in the work, has respect, you can trust him that he's going to do the right thing. And he kind of calmed down. And from that point on, we were good. But I'm not saying this, like, I'm not sitting here and bashing Robert Kraft and the Kraft family. I'm truly not. I'm just saying it jumped out at me. It struck a chord that if you're going to move on from leadership, it's the right thing to do so prior to. But it's not how they chose to do business. And here we are. So let's move on from this. The draft order is in at the top. I think the first 18 teams, non-playoff teams, the draft order is in. And for our purposes, it's the most important thing in terms of now we know the teams picking at the top. Excuse me. And here if you're watching on YouTube, and I'll stop down here and just say our numbers on YouTube have been skyrocketing recently. And we recognize part of it is just we're getting closer to the draft, and that's kind of our core here. But we want to thank everyone who has joined us in the live reaction shows, Tuesdays and Thursday shows, and we just appreciate you being here. Please continue to join as we continue to build this thing. And like, the views are outstanding. We got to get those subscription numbers up. So if you're watching on YouTube, just click a button for us if you don't mind. Same with like, subscribe, all those sorts of things. When you're listening on Spotify, Amazon, wherever, Apple, I should say, wherever you get your podcast. So with that said, if you're watching on YouTube, you're going to see the NFL draft order for 2025, and it starts with the Titans at 1. It goes all the way down. I'll just read it real quick. Cleveland at 2, Giants at 3, Patriots at 4. They go from 1 to 4 with that win. Jaguars at 5, Raiders at 6, Jets at 7, Panthers at 8, New Orleans Saints at 9, and the Chicago Bears back in the top 10 at that number 10 spot. We've also put there a check mark for all the teams that need a quarterback, right? 6, I think, 3, 4. Yeah, 6 of the top 10 need a quarterback. It's always the case, whether it's 5 or 7 or 8. It's always the case where a higher percentage of teams drafting at the top, and it makes all the sense in the world, have a quarterback need. And we should mention, like, literally breaking news. I just got a note from Tucker, 10:50, that the Titans have fired their GM, Rand Carthon. So it's obviously something that we'll continue to follow. They fired Robinson, their GM, a handful of years ago as well. So now, like, a change in leadership. So we'll see how that all plays out. But with the 6 of the top 10 teams needing a quarterback, I just keep going back to this, Mensch. It's wildly different every phone conversation I have, whether it's a GM, a former GM, someone who has been in high-ranking official in a personnel department who's now in television or podcasting, an area scout, doesn't matter. Like, the conversations, and this is what's different than most years, the conversations with people in the league are vastly different. In previous years, it's like, I like Stroud a little bit more than I like Bryce Young. Or I think Jaden is the number 1 prospect at quarterback. And I had those conversations slightly ahead of Caleb, slightly ahead of Drake, right? This year, the difference in the conversation, like, some people I talk to are like, I just don't trust Shedeur and his pocket instincts. What's so special about him? He doesn't have an elite arm. He's not a great runner and just an okay athlete. Like, but then there are other guys who are like, when I watch the tape, it's so clear the progression reads and how fast he's able to read Shedeur Sanders, how fast he's able to go through his progressions, his ability to create, and his instincts as a passer when the initial play breaks down, his touch, his accuracy, layering the ball. So, like, and then with Cam, it's the offense he's played in, it's progressed, but is he ready for the NFL? Love his traits, physical traits, but the nonchalant stuff, we get a lot to work on with him. He doesn't process as quickly as Shedeur. The conversations are wildly different from one person to the next, and that's, I don't want to say it's absolutely unique, like it's happened before, but it's rare. It doesn't happen a lot. Usually, there's more consistency from one conversation to the next, and I say that with two caveats or for two purposes. The first is I was really, I don't want to say surprised, but it was interesting. It was very interesting. That's the best word I can get. Like it piqued my interest. FanDuel are tremendous supporters here at the McShay Show. FanDuel, I looked up, and you can only in certain states get the draft odds, but FanDuel had Cam Ward at minus 125, the best odds to be the number one overall pick. Think about that. That's pretty wild.
Yeah.
And Shedeur Sanders at plus 105. Not a big gap between the two, neck and neck. But I also am aware that it was Shedeur higher earlier, and with the Titans getting that number one pick. And I've heard this. I haven't talked to anyone in Tennessee, and it wouldn't have mattered because there's going to be a change in leadership there anyway. But it's interesting that all of this buzz about Tennessee, and it's not surprising. I want to take people behind the curtain. Like I've talked to many organizations after the draft. When did you know that was your guy at quarterback? I think most recently, most famously, talking about Sean Payton with Bo Nix, it was 17 throws into his pro day, right? That's later in the process than where we are. That's in April or late March, okay? I've also talked to Brett Veach and Andy Reid, had very candid conversations with them about Patrick Mahomes. They told me the actual backstory of how Brett was annoying was annoying Andy Reid and kept was harping on, we got this guy who just finished up, I think it was his freshman year going into his sophomore year. He's our guy. He's our next. And then throughout his sophomore year, wasn't even eligible and was going into Andy's office 3 or 4 times. And Andy finally was like, get out of here. Like we're talking about like 22 months from now. Like we got a game to prepare for. And he'd be walking and be like, watch this play, So you make decisions organizationally on who your guy is at different portions, depending on the class, depending on what you fall in love with, at different portions of the process. And so I don't know if there are a lot of people in the Tennessee organization that have were clear. It was clear cut because I know one organization about 2 weeks ago, I talked to a scout and he said, yeah, I'm going in early January for top 32 meetings. I think it was kind of going over the top prospects, whatever, top 32, top 50, whatever it was. So they're not really even in definitive meetings yet, but when you know. And so clearly FanDuel, there's information out there that Tennessee likes Cam Ward more than Shedeur Sanders. But now we're just getting this breaking news. General manager for the Titans, Rand Carthon, fired. So how does that change things? Are the odds going to change in a week or so? So the whole thing's fascinating to me. So that's the first thing that's interesting. And I want to get your opinion and all your thoughts on this. The second thing that's fascinating to me, vast majority of conversations I have with teams, we wouldn't draft this guy in the top 10. We feel bad for teams drafting that need a quarterback in the top 10. This is not the year. It was the year when Stroud and Bryce were there. It was the year last year with, my goodness, 6 guys. Was it 6 guys in the top 12? Yes, 6 guys in the top 12. But this is not the year. And the comparisons have been made with the Kenny Pickett and Malik Willis and, in that class, Will Levis, all that. I think it's, I don't know, it's slightly different, but the concept is there. But almost a lot of people I talk to, Mensch, are like, no. And I just wonder if it's going to be a little bit more because we said with Kenny Pickett and Willis and Levis, those guys, quarterbacks climb. They'll go high. And they didn't that year. And I just wonder this year if it will be different than that 2022 class with Pickett and Willis and Levis and Corral and all those guys. Or we'll just see what we normally see. The norm is that quarterbacks rise to the top. So what you got, bud?
I'm leaning towards that. I feel like it's more like the Pickett class. I think teams are going to hold their water a little bit more and maybe take it different.
Okay. But pull up the graphic again. I hear you. I hear you. But Tennessee, Cleveland, Giants, top 3 picks all need a quarterback. And then right behind them at 6 and 7, Raiders and Jets need quarterbacks.
So there's a couple interesting things to get into here about how you don't I think it's a little narrow-minded to say that the only way you can address that position right now is through the draft. I think there's a few interesting free agents coming out. I think you explore some trade options for some younger guys. I want to ask you this. What would your market be? Would you take a swing on Aaron Rodgers if he's not in a Jets uniform next year?
No.
Absolutely not. The play has fallen off too much. The headache's too much.
It would have to be in August, quarterback injured. We have a playoff roster. That's the only way. Too much of a headache. Too much. The interviews, the attention, all the drama that comes with it. And quite frankly, he's shown some flashes in the last few weeks and all of that. And the hope is, if you're Aaron Rodgers or anyone considering it, that the Achilles is more healed.
2 years off.
2 years off. And it very likely will be. And I'm not saying he's ordinary, but without that mobility and the ability to extend, part of what made him so special and arguably the most talented and best quarterback in the league, that argument was there even when Tom Brady was playing at a high level. I don't see it anymore. And I wonder at 41 years old or whatever, does that come back?
Depending,
I'd much rather bring in someone lesser profile, less money, and take a chance on. And you and I talked about it. I mean, I think you had some names, but like, I'm not banking on like a Zach Wilson or a Drew Lock or Justin Fields, but to bring him in and compete if we need him. And a reclamation project. But here's the thing, like we've seen that this never occurred in the NFL.
Right.
The Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold stuff never occurred in the NFL for decades. For as long as we've been in this scouting. It just didn't, it almost never occurred. And we're starting to see more of it. Geno Smith, right? We're starting to see guys go to another place. But you're kind of betting on that they had such a terrible situation where they were. And then with Baker, remember Baker got some time with McVay and that really helped him. And I know it was limited, but he got some time with McVay to kind of reset. And we saw some flashes there. And then Canales did a nice job with him in year one and he's taken off. We saw San Francisco, Kyle Shanahan helping with Sam Darnold for a year.
Right.
Kind of get him right again. It was like, I always say, like the injured bird and like nursing him back to health, and then passing him along,
mend the wing,
passing him along to it. And they've both gone to places that have been, have had a certain level of commitment to him, but more importantly, could continue that development. Right. It was like outpatient, and I don't think anyone's arguing that Kevin O'Connor is one of the best in the NFL at developing quarterbacks. So, you're banking, you've got to have a lot of circumstances that you believe in, and you're mostly banking on that you have the quarterback developer in-house to do that. But I do think it will be a part of this offseason.
Here's what I'm saying to you as a GM. I hear the conversation, right? You're talking about you want to win a Super Bowl. You are looking for long-term success. I think the real conversation that we have right now is that there is a lack of talent at the quarterback position right now. And you're looking to bridge a gap until some of these younger college quarterbacks, who I think are, Nico from Tennessee. There's some guys that are going to be coming out. I think they're going to be Raiola from Nebraska.
Bridge a gap, and in the meantime, hope you strike gold.
And be competitive, and maybe strike gold. But you're looking to strike gold. I think you're managing your assets differently with that approach. If you're taking a realistic, logical approach to this, you're saying to yourself, do I really want to use a top 5 pick on a quarterback that maybe is going to do well? Or do I want to go after a guy that can make us maybe competitive for the next couple of years and address other holes in my roster? So one, we're in a better position to maybe attract that free agent quarterback later on. And two, you haven't wasted that high draft pick. You've used it wisely. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's kind of what I'm looking at. So I'll turn it around to you right now. Tennessee just called. They love the pod. They want to hire you as their GM. What are you doing with pick 1 right now?
It depends on what I've been able to do. I'm bringing in a veteran regardless. I don't know if it's Drew Lock.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm bringing in a veteran regardless. I'm doing the same thing Minnesota did.
Right.
Unfortunately, there's not many Sam Darnolds out there. I go back to like Belichick kind of laughing, and I know he says a lot of things in spite when it comes to the Jets, but like he's like, someone asked him, "Are you surprised with Sam Darnold?" He's like, "No." He's like, "In fact, nobody in the league was surprised except the Jets in Carolina."
Couldn't resist the shot. Yeah.
Yeah, but he's not wrong. Like he's not wrong, because everyone I talk to in the league, it's like, God, if Sam just had the right coaching and the right things around him, we all know his talent level. So I'm going that route for starters, and then we're diving in on. Honestly, here's my pecking order. We're going out. We're getting a veteran. Okay, I'm making damn sure that we've got a whoever we're hiring as the next. Well, you're the Titans, so you're not. We're going out. We're getting a veteran. Number one. Number two, we're shopping that pick. We're seeing what we can get for it. That's priority number two. Okay. If we don't get anything of value for that pick because other teams in the league kind of agree with the assessment,
right,
of the top quarterbacks, then you stay there. And now the really tricky part is, do you take a Travis Hunter over a quarterback? I don't think you do. I just don't think you do, because you got to take your cuts. And if you're right back there in the situation a year from now or 2 years from now, then you're right back there. But yeah.
So you're on the clock.
What would you do?
You got jammed. I'll tell you right now, we're on the clock in this situation. We're on the clock. We got jammed. I would take a guy like Abdul Carter. I think you got to start. I think you got to build up front. I think he's the best player in this draft. I think he's the most talented. I would take a guy like Abdul Carter, the edge out of Penn State.
I think a lot of people. I don't disagree. I think a lot of people need to go back and study the organizations that have built from the ground up. San Francisco.
Yeah,
you could have put a handful of quarterbacks in there and had similar success. And that's not taking anything away from Brock Purdy, but they were so damn good because of the way they drafted on the defensive line, the offensive line, then plugged in some skill guys. Detroit Lions offensive line, like they were miserable. They were suffering. Penei Sewell, Aiden Hutchinson. Don't we need a quarterback? Yeah, but there isn't one. There isn't one. So let's do. I agree with you. Brad Holmes, John Lynch. There's a lot of organizations that you can go back and actually, I shouldn't say a lot. There's a handful of organizations that have built this thing the right way. Seattle did back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
Built this thing the right way. They drafted a quarterback in the third round. It turned out to be Russell Wilson, and he was awesome for several years. But when you build the thing the right way, then you can plug in a quarterback from the third round.
Right.
Plug in Mr. Irrelevant. You can get a retread in Jared Goff that no one believes in. And every year you got to answer questions before and after the draft. If you're Brad Holmes, why didn't you take a quarterback? I don't know why everyone's saying that. Like, we've got our guy. So I don't disagree with you on that.
Yeah, I mean, I feel more comfortable doing that and then signing a lock and then maybe targeting Jackson Dart in the middle rounds. So you bring in a guy who maybe you don't love, but you're getting him at a much later point in the draft and who could be a decent player going forward. I'll say this too, because I'll go on the record right now. If you're telling me we're taking a quarterback, like Mensch, we're taking a quarterback, which one are you going with? I'm still going with Sanders, but that gap has closed. I feel like Sanders over the last 5 or 6 games, I don't know what the deal is. I don't know if he's playing it safer, not pushing the ball downfield, some of the hits that he's taking, even like weird stuff. Like I'm watching him on tape and he's got opportunities to get out of bounds and he's kind of being a little lackadaisical when he gets to the sideline. He ends up taking a hit because of it. The unnecessary contact for a guy who's that big, who's going to be playing against much bigger and stronger men for more games, it does scare me. There's some things that are popping out about Sanders. And I thought, if you'd asked me a month ago, I was very comfortable saying that Sanders was clearly the number one. I think Ward has definitely closed that gap. Still going with Sanders over Ward, but it's going to be an interesting pre-draft process.
Yeah, it's the traits of Cam Ward,
right?
The very clearly he's got a stronger arm, like the arm angles. Neither is a great runner. But I think Cam can extend with a little bit more athletic ability, a little bit more strength. It's going to be fascinating. It's going to be a fun draft lead up.
Who you got right now?
It kind of depends on who I am. If I've got a team that can protect and a coach that can continue to with both, I need a coach that can develop. If I've got a team that I think we've built our offensive line and can protect, I think I'm going with Shedeur. I think I don't want to say safer, but I know what I'm getting. I think I know he's a better pure passer in terms of layering the ball, ball placement, all those things.
It's fair.
Cam is a little bit more of a project, but he's got better tools. And so that's where I am on that. All right. This is fun. It's kind of just, I don't want to say an appetizer, but we're warming up and we're getting there. A couple weeks, this is going to be full-blown NFL draft, and I'm fired up for it. Like never before have I or we had the platform to actually do what we do. The behind the scenes, the grunt work, the all-star games, the combine, the tape watching, like 4, 5, 6 hours on every single player, 256 draft picks, 400 prospect evaluations. We got so much stuff that we can finally go through. When I was at my last spot for 15, 16 years, we were lucky to get to player 50 in the draft. We're going to get to so much more. Dive in. It's just a better opportunity and better platform, I should say, for diving into more rather than just focusing week in and week out on the top quarterbacks, top skill guys. We've got a lot to cover, and I'm fired up for it, and I know you are too. The McShay Show is brought to you by FanDuel. Football fans, buckle up, because for the first time ever, we've got 5 straight days of playoff football, and FanDuel is celebrating with the great playoff payoff. That's a no-sweat, same-game parlay every day for all 5 days. How about that? With a no-sweat SGP, you can combine your bets from the same game for a chance at even bigger winnings. And if it doesn't hit, you'll get bonus bets back. Listen, folks, of the 2 college football playoff semifinals, the Texas-Ohio State Cotton Bowl really jumps out at me. Every part of me as an analyst wants to say, take Ohio State, minus the 5.5, but I just can't do it. I like Texas. Maybe buy him, get that hook, get it up to 6, whatever you have to do. But I'm told that over 80% of the tickets so far are on Ohio State. That means when the public's on one side, go with the opposite side. I also think the fast starts for Texas have been critical. 14-3 against Arizona State in the first quarter, 21-7 second quarter versus Clemson, dominated Georgia in the first half, dominated A&M, so on and so forth. I think Texas is primed to counter that fast start that Ohio State has had in the last 2 college football playoff games with a fast start of its own. This is going to be a tight one. Give me the 6 points. So not only do we get to watch 5 straight days of playoff football, but that's also 5 chances to win big. Just visit FanDuel.com/McShay. That's FanDuel.com/McShay. It's the great playoff payoff, and it's only on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Must be 21 and older and present in select states, or 18 plus and present in D.C. Opt-in required. Minimum 3-leg parlay required. Refund issued as a non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire 7 days after receipt. Max refund $5 unless otherwise specified. Restrictions apply, including token expiration. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit rg-help.com. I'm also fired up for these college football playoff semifinals. And the first game, Thursday night, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, Orange Bowl, Notre Dame, Penn State, kind of mirror images in a lot of ways. Physical teams, right? Great in the fronts. Penn State's offensive line has been awesome recently. Defensive line is ferocious. Notre Dame dominant on the offensive line. Defensively is just really good. Neither team has weapons on the outside. Both teams have to kind of manufacture and create offense and rely on their run game and all those things. With that said, Notre Dame started off at -2.5 on FanDuel, I believe. Now is at -1.5. 2 big questions personnel-wise coming into this. Jeremiah Love, running back from Notre Dame. We saw him nicked up in the last game. He is the heart and soul of that Notre Dame offense. Without him, or with a limited version of Love, I'm concerned. Okay?
Right.
Love, Jadarian Price, think he's one of the great backups in college football and would start at most places, a high percentage of places in the country. but he's not Jeremiah Love. He's just not. And so that's something that absolutely has to be taken into consideration. We won't get the true answer, until game time. But apparently Tucker just sent a note over. Notre Dame's back up to -2.5. Okay, so Notre Dame back up to -2.5 in that. I'm glad I got it in at 1.5 yesterday. I went on my FanDuel app. I knocked that out. So I took Notre Dame -1.5. So I got that in before the buzzer, if you will. The other injury. Sorry, Abdul Carter, Penn State,
right,
edge rusher. Saw him sidelined for a portion of the last game. They're deep, they're fast, they're explosive. They've got dudes up front, but none of them is Abdul Carter. Okay.
Yeah.
That's going to be critically important as well. And again, we're not getting that information out of College Station and James Franklin. So we got to, take your chances. Hopefully you got a source there. Hopefully the, someone in the, guy. Someone in the training table is giving out information. I got that information from someone in the barbershop on Cam Ward that he was only going to play the first half. It wasn't my direct, it was somebody else. But that person got it from someone in the barbershop.
That's crazy.
You never know where you're going to get your information from. So here's what I want to do. Like, what jumps out to you? You've studied the tape. We've watched all season long. A million different angles, but we've also covered a million different angles. When Steve mentioned studying these teams on tape and preparing for this game, you're jumping out of your skin? Like, what is most important in this game, in your opinion?
When you look at the college football playoff and the teams that are left, there's some good safety groups. That Texas group is really good. The Ohio State group, I think, is the best. I think it's the best in the country. But when you watch these Notre Dame safeties, man, that's a damn good starting tandem between Xavier Watts and a Don Schuler. And I knew about Watts. Watts is a playmaker. He's got 13 picks over the last 2 seasons. He's a guy that plays over the top a lot in their scheme. He can do everything. Both of these guys, Schuler and Watts, are interchangeable. I want to make that point that they can line up over tight ends. They can play 1 high, 2 high, 3 high, whatever you want to do. Jump up and robber. They play the run well. They're both very versatile, but Watts is really that traditional free safety in the scheme, and Schuler's more of that traditional strong safety. And Schuler's a guy to watch in this game, man, because when you're looking at Penn State, it starts and ends really with, Ty Warren and those running backs, but really Ty Warren. And I think Schuler's going to get some matchups with Warren. And I'm encouraged by the way he played against Delp in the Georgia game. He's very physical in coverage. I do think that Ty Warren's a different animal, but what I'm excited about is that could be a battle back and forth. And now also when Warren runs those seam routes, he's going to see Watts over the top, and Aller's got to be really careful about his touch and timing on those throws because, like I said, Watts is a thief. He can make a big play in this game. And the other thing I'll say is Warren's a good blocker. He has some trouble with down linemen, but when he gets up on safeties and linebackers, Schuler's tough, man. He's got some snap in his hands. And the other thing about him is he's really aggressive and instinctive. And you saw it again in the Georgia game where he forced the fumble in the red zone, where he shot the gap and blew up the play in the backfield. Schuler's the guy who's going to play again closer to the line of scrimmage. So to me, I'm not saying that I think Watts and Schuler can shut down Warren, and they better be sound with their angles, and they better be sound wrapping up with those two backs. But these are two talented safeties that have a chance to make an impact in that game and really go to war with the best players in the Penn State roster. And that's what's fun about it to me, is that they could be a good back and forth. And they make enough plays to slow down who's really a unicorn in college football this year in Ty Warren, and slow down the great Ty Warren enough to give Notre Dame a chance to win this game.
Yeah, they'll have the opportunity based off of what we know. And I say that because Penn State has only targeted their wide receivers 35% of the time in the passing game. That's the lowest in the Power Four. 35%. Right. Think about the passing game. Their receivers are only getting targeted 35%. Right. That's 65% going to the tight ends and running backs. That's unusual, to say the least. Okay. So with that said, obviously, as you just covered, stopping limiting Ty Warren, shutting down kind of the middle of the field and some of the running back tight end stuff is critical. But I'm saying Penn State's Notre Dame safeties will get the opportunity to be aggressive in run support.
Right.
Because we know that Penn State's not going to, they're only throwing the ball to the receivers and the perimeter and all that stuff 35% of the time. It's all about the Penn State run game in this one to me. It really is. That, and I talked about it when we did our live reaction show. The offensive line for Penn State keeps getting better. You're the O-line guy, but I was obsessed with just how efficient and how well they work together in the run game versus Boise State. But this is a different animal than Boise State. Boise State's pretty good up front. This is a different animal with Notre Dame. They are disciplined. They're effective. They're strong and stout. Like, it's going to be tougher. What's interesting to me, and I always go back in college football seasons or NFL seasons for that matter, what changed? Like, when you see something that's different and improved upon, what changed? For Penn State, the biggest difference from that Ohio State game on is I think they kind of finally came to the realization as a program. All right, let's stop trying to force something that we're not great at, and let's just lean into what we're great at. We've got the best tight end in college football in Tyler Warren. We've got a really good second tight end in Khalil Dinkins, who's a better run blocker. Let's just go to 12 personnel, 1 back, 2 tight ends. Let's ramp that up. Let's just lean into what we're good at. Okay. Let's stop trying to spread teams out and run the football, because they're not buying it anymore. Ohio State didn't buy it. Okay. They got away with it against a lesser schedule for a long time, but when Ohio State said we're not buying it, James Franklin and the offensive staff, they came to a realization like, all right, we've got to win that game in order to do what we want to do this season. So what can we change? Let's lean into what we have. They're using 12 personnel. And I read this from PFF, Pro Football Focus. 12 personnel 58% of the time since the Ohio State game. You see it on tape. They're in 2 tight end sets a lot. 58%. That's up more than 20% than what they were the entire season through the Ohio State game. That's a significant difference. Okay. So they're leaning into that. And then the numbers that they get, they're third in 12%, that 58% were in 12 personnel. That's third in the FBS. Their yards per carry since that Ohio State game, 18th in the FBS, 5.7 yards per carry. Explosive runs, first in the FBS, 26 of them. Rushing touchdowns, first in the FBS, 14 of them since that Ohio State game. That's going to be the difference in this game, man. 12 personnel versus those safeties you just talked about, mano a mano, line it up. Who's going to win? Who's going to be more effective? Is it Notre Dame getting off blocks, or is it Penn State with their blocking up front?
I agree. I mean, that's where it starts, really. I will say on the flip side, Notre Dame's not great at receiver either, right? But I do think they're better at receiver than Penn State. And are they going to be, because listen, if Penn State has a similar performance to like they did against Boise State in terms of rallying to the ball, in terms of their tackling,
they're terrible. This is the best team in the country that's a marginal tackling team.
Right.
They've been atrocious at times. But even in that game where they limited Ashton Ginty. Listen to this. They limited Ashton Ginty to I think the season low 104 rushing yards, I think it was. He still had 16 forced missed tackles.
Yeah.
They rallied. But they also had such a singular focus on stopping the run. And it's not all that dissimilar against Notre Dame. But their defensive line is so disruptive that, like, even when the back is forcing missed tackles and they're missing tackles, that the defensive line kind of throws the back off
east-west,
gets them east-west. And so even if you miss the first tackle, you've got guys rallying because you've stopped. It's not like a runway where guys are going. There's a lot of stop and start and force, getting lateral and all that.
So they need a similar performance to what they did with Ginty. I mean, you can give me all the missed tackles. I mean, at the end of the day, they bottled him up. To me, the question will be, will Riley Leonard in those receivers be able to make some plays against, I think, a secondary that's a little bit vulnerable if they have to match up the man.
If the number one thing in this game, good.
Right. I'm just interested to see how that unfolds. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, if the number one thing in this is can Penn State run the football and that matchup, I would say number two is Riley Leonard's got to make some throws. I don't think he had 100 passing yards in the last game.
I don't think he did either.
And they didn't need it. I mean,
no,
they were so dominant in so many areas. They got big plays and turnovers and excuse me, but they had a long reception in that game of 14 yards. Okay, to Jordan Faison, 14 yards. They're going to need, like, if Faison had a 44-yard reception against Indiana 2 games ago in the first game of the college football playoff, they're going to need a couple of those, truly. And maybe it's Bo Collins, maybe, and Faison's their most dangerous receiver, and that's not saying a lot. It's like McElreavy, was it McElreavy, our offensive coordinator at Richmond, when he was talking to an NFL scout, said, I have the dubious distinction of being the offensive coordinator at University of Richmond. Like, yeah, I'm proud to have the job, but I'm not proud of the job we're doing.
Yeah,
Jordan Faison kind of has the dubious distinction of being the most explosive wide receiver on a very unexplosive Notre Dame wide receiver core. But I also think it'll be interesting to see, because this game is so much about stopping the run and taking away the tight ends and the running backs for Penn State. Will the Penn State's pass rush be as effective? Like, they'll get there. They're going to get there. They pressure opponents. Penn State does 41% of the time. That's near the top of the nation. Okay.
Right.
But what's Abdul Carter's status? Their best edge rusher. That's number one. And number two, because so much of the attack is that 3-headed monster in the run game of Love, Price, and Riley Leonard, are they going to be able to pin their ears back? So getting Notre Dame in obvious passing downs, those sorts of things, like all the cliche shit, like it will be important. But I wonder how big of a factor. It's one of Penn State's best traits, their ability to rush the passer. Will that be neutralized a little bit simply because Notre Dame is not looking to go spread things out and air it out?
Yeah, and you also have to keep Leonard in the pocket. You can't let him start to make plays with his feet and extend drives. And, there's that aspect of it too, a little bit of that mush rush where you can't just fly upfield against a guy who's more of a pocket passer who's not going to extend plays and get out of that pocket. So there's that aspect of it. Who you got?
Notre Dame. And there are a couple biases that I'm fully willing to admit.
Here we go.
I don't trust James Franklin. And for all of you out there saying, you just hate James Franklin, you hate Penn State. Like, nah. I mean, it's, I've voiced my opinion on all of it, but like when it comes, this is business. This is business. And with business, you make business decisions. And my business decision in part is made on James Franklin against top 5 teams, big pressure games, legit top tier opponents. And Notre Dame has proven that throughout the year. And I think put some emphasis on that with the way they not only beat Georgia, but like how they handled Georgia. So that's part of it. And secondly, the recency bias of watching that Notre Dame. They didn't have to empty the bag. Yes, they had the brilliant special teams play where Marcus Freeman, just waited for the perfect moment to bring out the offense. They caught him off sides and threw the ball down the field, got the penalty, extended the drive, and that was kind of it. But like they still were in complete control at that point, it was attainable for Georgia to come back, but they had controlled that game since like some point midway through the first half. I felt like Notre Dame completely controlled that football game. Also important to me, and you can't predict turnovers, but to me, this is going to be a close, tight game. I really believe that because they're two very similar teams. It should be a close, tight game. Penn State has been okay on the season, pretty good on the season with turnovers. We've seen some cracks at times, but they absolutely exploited Boise State. I think it was 4 turnovers in that game. Right? But Notre Dame has done it all year long. 31 takeaways this year Notre Dame has. That's best in the FBS. Just as importantly, Notre Dame has 141 points off of turnovers this year. That's also best in the FBS. low scoring game. Turnovers always feel like they're the difference. Those three things, I think Notre Dame is feeling it now, playing with the most confidence it's played all year long. Penn State finds way, like curious decisions here or there. Like
they do that.
Even the Boise State game, like the timeout, like there's always one or two where you're like, really? Right. And so I just, my confidence level is higher in Notre Dame because of those three things. How about you?
Penn State by 3. I look at that Georgia game. I look at that Georgia game a little bit differently than you. And I get what you're saying. It never really felt like they were in trouble. But let's be clear about it. I mean, Gunnar Stockton was making his first start, and they decide with the ball on their own 25-yard line with 30 seconds left in the half to, try to have this kid make a play. Next thing you know, he fumbles. The Penn State's got the ball. Notre Dame's got the ball at the 13-yard line. Go in and score. They get 10 points. The end of that half, they got 10 points in less than a minute, basically because of Georgia's inexperience at quarterback. And then you add on the kickoff return. They didn't run the ball. Riley Leonard made some plays with his feet. Riley Leonard was impressive with the plays he made against that Georgia defense. But I wasn't everyone's talking about Boise State and SMU for Penn State, right? Who have they played? Easiest path. Well, Notre Dame got Indiana, and then they got Georgia, a really good Georgia defense, and then a Georgia offense that was starting a young kid at quarterback who was trying to make his first start. And I think that showed up at times. There were cracks there. I also worry about the loss of Riley Mills for Notre Dame's defense. I worry about the loss of Benjamin Morrison, which they've had more time to get over. I mean, they've played most of this without him. I get it. But Riley Mills is a big deal in the middle. I just feel like Penn State, if Abdul Carter plays, again, that's the biggest injury news hanging over this game. I think Penn State runs the ball well enough, and if Abdul Carter plays, they're able to slow down Notre Dame enough, and they have more talent. I think if you're looking at the roster, they have more talent, and I think that in a close game like this, Penn State finds a way to come out on top. I think it's going to be a rock fight, though. I think it's going to be a low-scoring brawl, and I think it's going to be fun to watch if you're into that old-school football. I think it's going to be a great game, but I think Penn State ekes it out, and it heads to the national championship.
Yeah, I mean, the over-under, I think, is down to like 45.5.
Yeah.
And I think it started like 47.5, and it's even come down.
Yeah.
But go to FanDuel at FD Sportsbook on Twitter. Go to FanDuel. I think we gave you a lot there to work off of. If you're following me, you're taking Notre Dame minus the 2.5. I think also we've given you a lot of stuff to work off of in terms of like in-game stuff and, rushing lines and all those sorts of things. But for the updated odds, obviously get on your FanDuel app and let's take care of some business, right? Speaking of FanDuel lines, the next game, Friday night, 7:30 p.m., Cotton Bowl. Everyone's like, home game for Texas. Yeah, Ohio State's going to travel.
Right.
Maybe it's 60-40 at best, but I'm not putting a ton of stock, a little bit, but not a ton of stock into that. Ohio State, we saw it at 6 at one point on FanDuel. It is now kind of locked in for the last couple of days from what I've seen at minus 5.5. Ohio State's favored by 5.5 points versus Texas, 7:30 p.m. very next night. And a reminder, after the Orange Bowl, Thursday night, live reaction show. Once the second the game's over, we'll get into that. We'll start talking, obviously, about the potential next matchup, who's playing, but mostly just break down what happened in that first game, Notre Dame versus Penn State. I'm sure we're going to have a ton to talk about. So join us on YouTube after the game for that. And then again, we're back the very next night. No rest this week, Mensch. Friday night, we'll be right after this game, the Cotton Bowl, back on YouTube, live reaction show. Like literally, once the game's over, will give us like 5 minutes to get set up. Stop yelling at us. I know McShay's always late. He's on McShay time. Like I got it, but it takes a minute to like walk from the living room up here, click some buttons, put the headset on, make sure, Mensch, you're good. Yeah, I'm good. And then it takes from the second we're sitting there ready, it takes about 3 minutes or so. That's why you hear the music in the beginning. So please join us. We're looking forward to that. It's going to be 2 fun shows on Thursday night and Friday night following these semifinal games. But Ohio State minus 5.5, Texas. I'll start this one.
Okay.
To me, this is about the dudes. This game is about the dudes. And it's freaking rare that Texas gets on the field defensively and they don't have the best freshman on the field with Colin Simmons, their edge rusher, who keeps getting better every week, man. He's a freaking terror. I love it. But there's been no more important player in this college football playoff. You could say the best one game, Cam Scadaboo for Arizona State in a loss. He won MVP in that game against Texas. But the most important player so far in the college football playoff has easily, in my opinion, been Jeremiah Smith. It's not even my opinion. Like, get out of here. Against two top 30 pass defenses in Tennessee and Oregon, by any metric you want, they're very good. They're in top 20, top 30, somewhere in that range, pass defenses. Tennessee and Oregon. Listen to these numbers, Mitch. 13 catches, 290 yards, and 4 touchdowns.
Unreal.
Okay? Unreal. And so much of it has been the departure from we're going to line up and pound it. We don't care if it's Michigan with the best defensive tackle tandem in the country. We got to run the football. This is Chip Kelly. Chip was brought in to, exercise his run game. But I talked about the difference in personnel groupings to the 12 personnel for Penn State. What's been different since that Ohio State game? Well, for Ohio State, what's been different since Michigan? 2 things. One has been they are running counter more. They are they're instead of being that Chip Kelly zone team where you're moving in unison, they have incorporated counter, which has become so much more a part of the college football and NFL running landscape, if you will. To make that kind of shift after the regular season and to be remember we were talking about like it was the first game or second game. I forget, Ohio State, one of the 2 college football playoff games. I think it was Tennessee, and it's certainly against Oregon, like more misdirection at the snap of the ball, guards and tackles countering, right? And it's been effective. So that's been something that they've done that obviously in this game, Texas is going to have to deal with. They have not, I actually, this is another thing I read on Pro Football Focus, like they've only faced like 80 or 50 or 80, somewhere in that range, snaps of counter this year. Just crazy. So, yeah. So, not that they were apparently really successful in those snaps, but they're not used to probably the amount that Chip's going to throw at them. But much more importantly, the focus has been for Chip Kelly in this offense for Ohio State. We've got to get forward the football. And yes, it's more aggressive in the passing attack in general. And they've got when you've got the best player in college football in Jeremiah Smith, and you also as his counterpart, Emeka Egbuka, depending on who you talk to in the NFL, is either going to be a late first-round pick or like top 40 picks overall. You get potentially 2 first-rounders and a guy who would be the first pick in this year's draft, next year's draft, possibly, and maybe in 2027's draft when he's actually eligible. Right. Sorry. They've done the right thing. And my goodness, they're more dangerous. So here's the thing. I want you on Friday night, as you're getting ready, the highlight of the night will be joining Mensch and I on the reaction show after this game. But the appetizer to that is I really want you to have all your drinks on the table, a cooler set up in the living room, appetizers laid out and scheduled. You don't need chip runs and all that, especially when Ohio State's on the ball, because this is a rarity, man. This is a luxury. We are being afforded the best matchup in the entire college football season with the Ohio State passing game as it currently is humming versus the best pass defense in college football. And I say that also with the caveat that Texas is not a man-to-man team. This is going to be a different animal. And yes, Jeremiah Smith and the numbers are good. And you can look at the analytics and the metrics and all that. They're good versus zone like they are. But let's not kid ourselves. They absolutely annihilated Tennessee in man-to-man coverage, and they did so in opportunities. They created some stuff versus zone, but it was all about Jeremiah Smith taking advantage of personnel at differentials. Texas, I just love watching this Texas secondary. They've got dudes. Don't get me wrong. Jahdae Barron's a stud. Their best 3 cover guys in the back end are Barron, Andrew Makuba, and Michael Taff. And they've got a bunch of other. I told you last week, it feels like they have 12 different safeties who are supporting the run, making plays in coverage. But Texas is in zone over 80% of the time. It's all about eyes, instincts, squat and drive, baby. Like, they are so good at what they do. They're so good at what they do. So this is an opportunity to just sit back and watch what I think is the best matchup we've been afforded literally the entire college football season.
Right. And it comes down to, I have no concerns about the skill players for Ohio State. Can Will Howard continue to play at a high level? Can that offensive line continue to play at the high level that it's played at so far? And there's really no reason to believe that they can. I mean, they've faced Tennessee and Oregon. They didn't have the Boise State and SMU matchups. They've played two quality opponents and have played really well. So I'm not playing the card of, earlier in the year I was very critical of Will Howard. I'm not saying that, but they need to continue to do what they've done over the last two games for Ohio State to have success.
What jumps out at you?
I'm going on the flip side. And you know who I'm going to talk about. Listen, I texted you right away. I was like, look, man, we could talk about a million things in this game, but I want to talk about Caleb Downs. Yeah. And you're like, go for it. Let's not overthink it. Right. So I'm watching Caleb Downs, and listen, we've seen him earlier this year. It was awesome watching him go against Ty Warren when Ohio State played Penn State, and the one-on-one matchups they have. He can shut down or lock down the best tight end in the country. He's capable of that. He can play center field over the top. He's got that kind of range. But there's, watching the tape over the last two games, something that I've just really enjoyed is how Jim Knowles is using him and when they go with two high looks. And they are not playing him as one of the two high safeties. They've got Hancock back there, and they've got Ransom
Jordan
back
Hancock,
there.
Yep.
Yeah, and what they're doing with Downs
and Hancock was a cornerback that they moved to that free safety.
Right, who's kind of that nickel, and they're almost swapping him. And let me explain. One of the looks is Downs is essentially playing inside linebacker. Essentially, I say, because he's about 8 yards deep. The linebackers, he's in between that linebacker and safety depth. And what that really does is it allows him to keep everything in front of him, but still puts him closer to the line of scrimmage. So he's reacting to the run that much faster. He's breaking on underneath passes that much faster. And the other thing they're doing with these two high safety looks is they're lining him up at linebacker depth just with inside leverage on the safety. So any of those drag routes, any of those in-breaking routes, he's already in a great position to play the ball. And two things that jump out to me in terms of what that means in this game is when you watch that RPO throw to Matthew Golden, that long throw to start Texas's, to spark Texas's offense in that last game against Arizona State. That is a much tougher throw to make with Downs in that kind of an alignment. With him sitting in that window, it's a much tighter throw to make. And the other thing about it, and this is one of Downs' great strengths, is his range against the run, how fast he closes, his ability to break outside. When you have him in that inside linebacker spot and Texas is trying to run that outside zone, good luck, man. Yeah. With that defensive line in front of him, good luck, man. He closes so fast, and he is so physical. I mean, I watched him. He took what I think is a bad angle in that Penn State game against Singleton, where he went inside out instead of fighting over the top. And Singleton is an explosive runner, man, and Downs was still able to get there and make that play. So I think both in terms of the run and the pass for what Texas wants to do, in terms also the other thing I love about when he's inside of the slot, you try to run those screens, those quick hitters to the outside that I think Texas wants to, kind of get their offense going. Downs will blow those up, man. He will throw the blockers into the backfield. He will beat blocks. He will close. I just think when you're looking at him in that alignment, when Ohio State goes too high, watch for Downs underneath and the kind of impact he can make in this game.
These are two teams that at some point during the season that we have both said they leave me wanting, right?
Right.
Ohio State in certain games, and especially after the Michigan game, there's so much talent. They got all these fourth and fifth year players on the defensive side, all these second, third, fourth rounders, and maybe you sprinkled in one or two first rounders, but they're not playing like first rounders all the time. It just left you wanting.
Right.
Texas, still to this day, every game I watch, there's brilliance, and then there's leave you wanting. There's more, there's more in there. For Ohio State, the last two games, all the stuff that we felt like, I know there's more in there, it's come out. Right?
Yeah.
Texas, I still have that feeling. But why is Ohio State, I mentioned on the offensive side some of the things, but on the defensive side for Ohio State, that's one very specific transition or difference in the college football playoff. Like Hancock played, I think it was 89 snaps at free safety the entire season prior to the playoff. And he's played 79 snaps in the first 2 games of the college football playoff at free safety. That's one thing that's different. But I'll just like simplify it. The easier thing to see on tape, 44, 33, and 91. They've been there 100 years combined.
Fair.
And we've always talked about them. Are they first rounders or are they second rounders? What are they? Because we know the talent's there. They're not elite edge rushers, but they're damn good football players. But I want to see a little more.
Right.
Tyleek shows flashes, but I want to see a little more dominance. They've played as previously advertised and what we thought that they could be these last 2 games. My goodness. JTT, Jack Sawyer, like good luck getting outside and running on them, and more violence and like just down to down nastiness as pass rushers. Okay.
Yeah.
And Tyleek has been dominant on the inside, and there's been some other guys too.
He's been unreal.
He's been unreal. And I look at this Texas offensive line, and you said it, at one point we were bashing like LSU, all these first rounders, they're not playing to their, to what they're expected to be. There's several offensive lines that just weren't playing up to snuff in college football this year. But you always kind of said, look, don't lump Texas in there. They've played well. But the last few weeks, we've seen some cracks.
Yeah.
Cameron Williams, the right tackle, dinged up. Some mental errors from both Kelvin Banks Jr., who could be the first offensive tackle taken in April. We've seen some mental errors. We've seen Kelvin Banks in and out of the lineup being dinged up. Cameron Williams out of the lineup, didn't play last week. That's going to be fascinating to watch because Texas is going to have to win in the trenches, I think, to win this game.
Yeah, as much as I've liked Texas's offensive line, there have been problematic games, right? The Georgia games are problematic, and that's against, the best front they've faced. So here we go again. Can this offensive line that I think is really talented and has played at a high level at times, can they elevate? Are they healthy? Is Cameron Williams healthy enough? It looks like he's going to play. It's encouraging. Is he healthy enough? He's a better run blocker than Gooseby, who comes in and is a solid backup, but they're not the same without those 2 offensive tackles in the lineup. So it'll be interesting to see if they can elevate their play against a defensive front that's playing with its hair on fire. And by the way, not only do you have to worry about those guys, the linebackers, Styles and Simon for Ohio State, are all over the place right now. I mean, they are.
I told you last week, like there are 2 players that I know for sure I need to go back and reevaluate based off of my preseason and early season tape study. They're different dudes right now, man.
Right. They are fast. They are physical. They are angry. I mean, that whole Ohio State team is playing angry, and you just see it with the way they're playing. Now, I will say this. I do think that that Texas is going to have to attack deep, and their ability to hold up long enough to do it will be interesting. But I do think there's opportunities to either get a big play or draw a pass interference. I think they can attack those corners, and they need to. They need to get Ohio State to back off, because if they start dinking and dunking, it's going to be like a shark's feeding frenzy with that Ohio State defense. It's going to be a lot of 3 and outs, I think. So they're going to have to take some shots downfield, like they did with some success in the second Georgia game. So that to me will be one of the matchups one of the really only areas that I feel really good about the matchups for Texas, the Texas offense against the Ohio State defense going in.
This game's on Ewers.
No question in my mind.
This game is on Quinn Ewers. And Quinn Ewers is we well documented. You talk about leaving you wanting all season long. Since that Michigan game, yes, he had the oblique injury. He had the ankle injury. We can make excuses. I've said very clearly I can see Steve Sarkisian, the head coach and offensive play caller, has protected him, has guided him along, put him in positions to succeed, but not forced him to tap into everything that he's got. If we get the Quinn Ewers that we saw, second, third, early fourth quarter against Arizona State, and that we've seen in a lot of the middle of games throughout this year, Texas isn't going to win this game. If we get the Quinn Ewers we've seen on the first 10, 15 play calls off the script, and when there's been urgency, when there's no choice in the matter, and it's up to Quinn, whether it's a huge drive they need in the fourth quarter to get a lead back extended, whether it's Arizona State when the game was on the line, trying to get overtime and win that game in double overtime. There has got to be urgency in Quinn Ewers' game and in Steve Sarkisian play calling for 4 quarters that we have not seen all season long. That's their only chance to win this game. Matthew Golden has stepped up, dude. He's eclipsed 65 receiving yards. He eclipsed 65 receiving yards just once in the first 10 games this season. That's when they were trying to feed it to Isaiah Bond. Didn't know who they were. Maybe didn't know what they had in Golden. But Bond was a disaster when he was still on the field in the last couple of games and has been injured since and has not played. And so 4 of the last 5 times that Texas has taken the field, he's eclipsed 65 receiving yards, including 162 against Georgia and 149 against Arizona State. That's our guy, okay?
Right.
But beyond that, you've got Gunnar Helm at tight end, who's not the most explosive, but he is a reliable, like when you need him on third downs and in big situations, he's there for you. You got Ryan Wingo, who's got to step up and provide me more than 1 or 2 catches. He's got to.
Couldn't agree more with you because he's talented enough.
That's on Sark, and to a certain degree, that's on Wingo. You're not a freshman anymore, bud. Like, it's time to go. You got 15 games under your belt. It's time to go. And you've got DeAndre Moore Jr., who has been a very good complement. He's not a huge difference maker, but a very good, like, running his routes, getting in and out of breaks, complement on the other side of Matthew Golden. The only chance that Texas has to pull off this upset, not the only, but the clearest path I see is they got to come out aggressively. They've got to attack like they have in the first 15 to 25 plays on the script, and they've got to bring it to Ohio State. They've got to. Ohio State's biggest personnel weakness in this game, you just said it, and I'm going to reiterate it. Those corners, they're big, they're physical, good in run support, but they are exploitable, for a lack of a better word.
Agree.
They're vulnerable. If you can utilize your quickness and your speed and your athleticism that you have, I don't know if Isaiah Bond's going to finally step in and be ready to actually go. We played it. You said a few snaps you saw him on the field, made no impact against Arizona State. That certainly could add, but I also am not going to put him in there and start forcing the ball to him because I've got my guy in Golden. We've got Wingo, who we need more out of. We've got DeAndre Moore, who I just mentioned. So that could be an added element for them. But this game is on Quinn Ewers, and it's on Steve Sarkisian to force Quinn Ewers into a mindset that it's fourth quarter, we're down by 4. I don't care if they're up 10. I don't care if they're up 17. It's fourth quarter, we're down by 4. We need this drive every time because they're not going to be able to run the football effectively. We've seen it. There have been a couple games. We saw Quintravian Wisner come out like 200 yards right around there, rushing yards against Texas A&M. But this is not Texas A&M. This is an unbelievably stout, disciplined team that what they do best is contain the outside, and what Texas needs to be successful run the football is that outside zone. It ain't going to work. So,
I agree.
Who do you got?
I got Ohio State. I do think that Texas could cover. I went 28-24. I just feel like Texas's defense plays with enough pride. Sark finds a way to try to keep it close. It wouldn't be surprising me if it was a backdoor cover. I feel really comfortable about Ohio State winning this game, and the analyst side of me says that they should cover comfortably. But my gut is telling me that Texas finds a way to keep it a little bit closer than maybe people think.
Yeah, it's funny when we start talking about FanDuel and start talking about, padding our bank accounts and doing all the fun stuff. It's literally like 2 different brains.
Right.
It really is. Like on the field, as you study the last 2 games, you study some of the trends and the personnel and all that stuff. Texas is clear. Ohio State has been the better team. But there's been no team all season long that Ohio State has faced that has had as much talent as Texas. Okay. And when you're evaluating who you're going to take, when you get on your FanDuel app and you're trying to, get your baby girl a new pair of shoes, you got to look at like, okay, what's important? Well, first of all, it's at 5.5. Buy it to 6 if you got to, or wait to see if it gets back to 6. I want Texas with the 6. The second thing is I've got some information from some people that 82% of the tickets so far have been on Ohio State.
Wow.
And I think the recency bias and how they've played in the last couple games and how Texas has kind of sputtered and just kind of crashed and burned its way into the runway. They landed. They're here. But like that plane, we're not flying that plane for like 4 months while it's in the hangar.
Mm-hmm.
But that's how it feels. Like, yeah, they're here, but I don't know. But this team's loaded. And Sark, as an offensive play caller, will have it ready. And they will find the holes in that too high safety look, and they'll find ways to exploit it. They will. A couple other things that stand out to me. If you're going to trust Texas, trust that defensive line. They've been absolutely dominant the vast majority of this year. Ohio State, for all of its greatness the last couple of weeks, if you go back the last 3 weeks, they're giving up pressures, okay? Like 34 pressures in their last 3 games. So that's been different, but it's also because they haven't thrown the ball more, but they're taking more deep shots. So it's understandable. But that offensive line is gettable. Okay?
Right.
That offensive line is gettable. They've played great the last couple of weeks, but it's gettable. And Texas is averaging 17.2 pressures per game. They had 31 pressures, Mensch, against Arizona State. So if you're going to trust something, trust the Texas defensive line. But I also want to say this. Ohio State has jumped its last 2 opponents. Jumped them. Like in an alley, no idea it's coming, right? With a crowbar. Absolute crowbar, dark alley off the side of the head. Tennessee and Oregon, okay? I know it's dark, but like that's what it felt like. Like left stumbling, like disoriented. Tennessee and Oregon, especially Oregon. But if there's a team out there that can match a fast start and they can kind of, quell that initial rush that Ohio State has shown it's had the last couple of weeks, it's Texas. I want to go back. Fast starts have been Texas's game. It's continuing that momentum and not getting too conservative and what happened from the late second quarter or third quarter on. But 14-3, they jumped Arizona State in the first quarter. Texas did. Texas, the week prior against Clemson, 21-7 in the second quarter, and at halftime it was 28-10. Texas 6-0 against Georgia. That's not that big of a difference, a couple field goals. But remember, late in that second quarter, they had around 200, I think it was 197 total yards of offense. Georgia had 6. Okay? Go back before that. A&M 17-0 first half. Texas 24-0 Kentucky the week before. Texas 10-0 first half versus Arkansas in a really sloppy game. And so on and so forth.
Right.
Give me the 6. I'm taking Texas. Give me the 6. I'm not saying Ohio State's going to lose. I actually think like every part, like you said, every part of the analyst in me sees a better Ohio State team that's peaking at the right time. And I believe we're going to see Ohio State in the national championship game. And FanDuel agrees. It's a huge, they're like minus, I wish I had the numbers here. They're like minus 100 or 200 in terms of teams to win the national championship. Every other team is like plus 400 and greater.
Right. Makes sense.
But I want the 6 points with Texas in this game. That's a wrap, man. That's it. We got an hour and 20 minutes right around there. Really important stuff, kind of a building block for the draft. Patriots don't get the first pick. Tennessee's sitting there. Brand new general manager. A lot to talk about with these quarterbacks, Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward. We have so much to look forward to when this college football playoff is over. And going down to the Senior Bowl, our entire crew's going down there. We've got cameras. We're going to be a headache for Jim Nagy and Molly, who's his top assistant, and all those sorts of things. But we're fired up for that. But in the meantime, please join us. We're really excited about Thursday and Friday night this week after the semifinal games. Join us on YouTube. We'll be there as soon as humanly possible. You might have to wait a few minutes. You don't have to yell and scream. We're doing our best. But we will be there moments after the final gun goes off in Notre Dame, Penn State on Thursday night, and then moments after the Cotton Bowl, Texas versus Ohio State. These are going to be two great games, and Mensch and I will be there. You can yell at us. You can yell with us. We're going to have a lot of fun. So appreciate everyone's support, and we will see you on Thursday night. Must be 21 plus and present in select states. For Kansas, in affiliation with Kansas Star Casino. Or 18 plus and present in D.C. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit rg-help.com. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut or visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 1-800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York.